Hello and welcome to Archetype Builds. Today we're talking about One D&D again, but we're taking a look at how some of your favorite builds will do in the new One D&D rule set. This is a little "Where are they now?" of optimized builds. Can we get some game music? Where are they now for your optimized builds? Good thing. Alright, so first and foremost, the classic Great Weapon Master, Pole Arm Master feat combo, which is so prevalent on fighters and barbarians and paladins. This is probably going to see some major changes. So first of all, Great Weapon Master has been redesigned. In the Experts playtest very early on, they basically struck the -5 to hit, +10 damage part of Great Weapon Master, which was why people were taking it in the first place. They've replaced it with do additional damage once per turn equal to your proficiency bonus. So I think on average, that's going to be less. The rest of the thing is in place, including the cleave ability, which after you score a critical hit or reduce a creature to 0 hit points, you can make an additional attack as a bonus action, so that's still there. I think that what you're losing here in terms of power is meant to be compensated for in terms of the weapon masteries. Now, if you were planning to combo this with Polearm Master, which gets you an automatic bonus action attack each turn, and an easier way to use your opportunity attacks with the entering of your reach, you're going to be restricted to glaives, halberds, and pikes, right? Which can have the graze, cleave, and push weapon masteries, respectively. These are pretty good masteries, especially if you are counting your damage numbers. I think cleave is pretty good. It doesn't require a bonus action for that cleave. And then the graze obviously will make it so you're consistently hitting. I actually think Polar Master might not be the move here with the new build. I think Great Weapon Master works just fine with some other builds. Barbarians and Paladins are going to need their bonus action really consistently. Paladins for the new smites and lay on hands. Barbarians to maintain their rage if no one has attacked them. So I think overall you might be better off investing into your attack action with Great Weapon Master and leaving the Polar Master behind. Overall, I expect this build to be just on par with other damage builds in the new 1D&D playtest and not be a must-have for optimizers. The ranged cousin of the Great Weapon Master build is the Sharpshooter. Now, Sharpshooter has also been redesigned to remove the -5 +10 to hit. In my opinion, this was even more egregious because, like, when you think about a Sharpshooter, like, what a Sharpshooter does is aim really well, right? So, wild that this is the way that they... Anyway, not the point. Sharpshooter is going to maintain bypassing cover, firing in melee, and the long shot doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attacks, which is what you would expect for a Sharpshooter, which is really great. I think this is a good change, but obviously there's no benefit to damage here, right? Removing disadvantage from a situation which you were avoiding previously is not going to show up in your damage numbers. So all of a sudden, I think this is quite possibly like a situational feat. Like, this probably isn't going to be taken by most ranged damage dealers. That is the Sharpshooter. I think that one's pretty much gone. Now, most people would combo this with the hand crossbow and the crossbow expert feat, which allowed for an additional bonus action attack with the hand crossbow. The hand crossbow is going to only have the weapon mastery property Vex, which gives you advantage on the next attack roll you have against that target, which actually works really well for this particular build, so I do think you're going to see some substantial increase there. With the new Sharpshooter, when you're firing at long range, it does not impose disadvantage. So it doesn't cancel out disadvantage, it doesn't impose it in the first place. Which means the new Vex property on the hand crossbow is going to give you advantage on your next attack against the target, potentially at long range. So you're going to be hitting much more consistently with this combination. but I don't actually know if Sharpshooter is needed for that build. It's only going to come into play if you're closer than 5 feet or further than the normal range of your weapon. So that's pretty situational. I think maybe, just like with Great Weapon Master, you're going to leave one of these 2 critical feats behind. Number 3 is the Coffee Lock. Now, Warlocks no longer recover spell slots on a short rest, which means this is just entirely scrapped, right? This concept can no longer exist in 1D&D. As a side note, I've never talked about Coffee Locks on the channel. This might be a good time for me to take a little tangent. So this is a little tangent time. We're going to do a little tangent time. All right. I never thought this build was like a valid build. So when people would be like, oh, you just take like a week of downtime and like you keep short resting and adding onto your sorcery points, and now you've got infinite spell slots. And he's like, no, you don't. But like I get the alternative is like maybe you blow all of your sorcerer spells in a combat, and then you take several successive short rests to create those warlock spell slots, change them into sorcery points, refuel your sorcery points up to your sorcerer level, grind those sorcery points into spell slots, and then I guess profit. But like, you know, if you long rest, they all come back. So I never thought this build was useful, but now it is gone, and in my opinion, good riddance. Number 4 is going to be the Hexadin. There's a lot of builds that use a Hexblade dip in order to use Charisma for their attack and damage modifiers in melee combat, right? It's common, I think, with certain Bard builds, but moreover, right, with Paladin, who wanted a high charisma for their aura of protection, but also wants to be in the melee and dealing damage, and it's hard to balance those ability scores. So a 1-level dip into Warlock to get that Hexblade Patron ability was valuable to them. This is just as easy now in the new system, because even though your subclasses move to 3rd level, your Pact Boon now includes the Hexblade Charisma, using Charisma to attack and to hit, as a part of your Pact Blade that you get at level 1. So just as easy to take 1 level of Warlock to make this build work, and you could even take 2 more levels and get an entirely different subclass set of abilities, right? Because it's not tied to the subclass anymore. So I actually think instead of, you know, this kind of going by the wayside, I think we're going to see a lot more of this in 1D&D. I think there are going to be builds that make use of new, like, Warlock patrons to give bonuses to them in melee combat. From what I saw in the original playtest, I think we only saw the Fiend Warlock, right? We haven't gotten the whole 4 subclasses thing. So remains to be seen what we're going to see from this, but I think this is definitely here to stay. Last up, number 5, we have the Bearian. This is the Barbarian levels to get Rage, to get Resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, into a Moon Druid that wild shapes into CR1 beasts, which have a ton of hit points, that now has Resistance, and when you drain that, you go back to yourself, which has Resistance, and then you wild shape again, and it's got Resistance and a ton of hit points. So these were the unkillable monsters on the battlefield, the super tanks that could weather, 1,000 damage or whatever. And unfortunately, in 1D&D, the Moon Druid is only going to get their Druid level times 3 in temporary hit points, instead of getting the full animal's hit points. Now that is almost always way less, like way less. And because you're multi-classing at lower levels when most people play, your Druid levels are lower, right? Because you've taken 2 levels of Barbarian or whatever. So you are experiencing like 9 temporary hit points when you first kind of unlock this set of abilities, which is pretty bad. So this is severely nerfed. On a side note, though, if you are playing a high-level Moon Druid, so your campaign is going to level 12, 13, 14, 15, because the beast forms, and I did a video about this, because the beast forms don't scale that well past CR4, basically, you would be severely advantaged by taking a couple levels of Barbarian to make those temporary hit points that you do get last longer. So I actually think that like for a high level campaign, this build is still viable for druids. It's not really like a great barbarian way to do things. I think it was never that, but like in the past I've seen like barbarian, 5 moon druid 4 or something like that, because the CR1 forms were pretty strong. And that's no longer the case, right? The CR1 forms are not going to be the big boost that they used to be. That's where our top 5 most commonly optimized builds are going to land in the One D&D world. And who knows what we'll see from One D&D in terms of replacements. I think people are actively working on that now, and you're going to see some of those builds coming out very soon. Stay subscribed, and I will see you next week.